They thought they had her contained. One man drove his weight into her upper body. Another clamped her legs tight. Both were smiling, right up until the moment the sound changed. First came the fracture, then the pop. By the time the echoes faded, 2 elite operators were howling against the mat. Around them, 301 Navy commandos stood motionless, staring as a woman they believed they could dominate dismantled them in seconds. Before we break down the exact instant they went down, and what command had to say afterward, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this story proves something brutal. The smallest presence in the room is often the most dangerous one to challenge. The wind off the Atlantic surged in sharp, salty bursts, rattling the steel walkways of the Orion testing range, a restricted naval training complex carved into the edge of a jagged peninsula. Below, waves crashed violently into reinforced concrete barriers, their thunder fading beneath the heavier sound building inside the main drill enclosure. Tension hung thick in the air. They were already assembled. 301 Navy commandos formed tight, disciplined lines around the open-air arena. Some stood with arms folded. Others crouched low beneath weighted rigs and harnesses. Every single one had been pulled from rotation, dragged out of deployment prep or post-mission recovery, for a demonstration that was anything but routine. This wasn't theater. It was part of the annual Constraint-survival readiness review, a sanctioned evaluation designed to test reactions under worst-case combat conditions. Most scenarios were familiar, zero-visibility breaches, vertical extractions under simulated fire, mass casualty response drills. But this one was different, and the reason stood alone at the center of the mat. Staff Sergeant Alara Knox, 32, former Force Recon Marine, recently transferred into Navy operational support as a combat medical and recovery instructor with cross-service clearance. She wasn't tall. About 5'6", solid, efficient build. Nothing about her screamed legend, faded green utilities, a tight black braid tucked beneath her cover, a clean, unadorned utility belt, no rank stitched to her outer gear, no ribbons, no unit insignia, just a worn label inside her duffel, Knox E. Recon Med Diver Roman II Deep Ops Cert. She adjusted her gloves without a word, spine straight, eyes level, not defiant, not nervous, just steady. The commandos didn't know what to make of her. A few traded looks, some whispered. Others waited, almost expectantly, for someone more imposing to take her place. None of them had read the classified after-action report buried in restricted archives from the South China Sea. The one detailing how she stabilized a crushed diver beneath collapsing pressure lines using a belt harness, 3 controlled breaths, and a single blade. To them, she was just another instructor checking a box. To her, it was another drill, another chance to teach survival before someone needed it for real. Commander Rourke stepped onto the steel platform and called the group to attention. "This afternoon's exercise," he said sharply, "will demonstrate close quarters reversal under simulated submersion entanglement." He gestured toward Knox. "Our instructor is authorized for live demonstrations of release and neutralization techniques applicable to medics or divers trapped under hostile conditions." He paused. "All actions are approved, force will be controlled. This evaluation measures efficiency, not brute strength." A few nodded. Most stayed stone still. Then Rourke added, "She's the reason 2 operators walked away from a capsule implosion off Palawan last year. So if you're here for entertainment, you're in the wrong place." Knox didn't respond. She didn't need to. Still, the murmurs crept back, quiet, confident, edged with disbelief. Not everyone was prepared to learn from someone who didn't look like them. Not yet. As she stepped onto the center mat, her boots landing softly against the vinyl, she felt it immediately. The pressure, the skepticism, the unspoken challenge of men convinced they had nothing left to learn. There was no applause, no acknowledgement. 2 figures near the front shifted their stance, eyes narrowing like hunters spotting weakness. Petty Officer 2nd Class Ryan Holt and Petty Officer 1st Class Mason Cole, both from Kraken Team, a unit infamous for punishing water entry drills and even harsher egos. Holt was built like a barricade, thick torso, dense neck, arms folded high like weapons. Cole was leaner, all tendons and timing, a grappler who moved in sudden, surgical bursts. When he smiled, it wasn't friendly. If Holt was force, Cole was precision. And neither of them believed the woman standing in front of them belonged there. Not yet. As Iris knelt beside the padded kit to arrange a compressed restraint rig and a simulated snare mesh, Keller leaned toward Rourke and spoke just loudly enough for half the circle to catch it. "What's she supposed to teach us? How to fold?" Rourke answered with a low sound, half scoff, half snarl. "I've hauled guys twice her weight out of a ruptured bulkhead with a fractured back. And this is an instructor now." The dig landed. A few of the younger operators flashed tight, uncertain grins, but most stayed carved from stone. The ring wasn't laughing anymore. Iris didn't look up, but she felt it anyway, the subtle pressure change beneath her boots. Arrogance didn't need eye contact. It announced itself through tension. She kept setting the apparatus with a focus that never begged for approval. It took it. Not with swagger, but with stillness, accuracy, and a confidence earned in places the others didn't name out loud. Rourke and Keller missed that entirely. They saw only someone smaller, sidelined, out of place, someone who didn't belong in the pit. When Captain Latham stepped forward and addressed the ring again, his voice cut sharp. "This drill simulates partial entanglement under dual constraint. The instructor will begin supine, back down, with both upper and lower limb restriction. The attackers will apply standard downward control, no full force." His eyes swept the volunteers. Before he finished the last word, Rourke stepped out. Keller followed, silent, rolling his gloves with the same blank calm. No checks, no nods, no clarifying questions. Their decision was already made. This wouldn't be a demonstration, it would be a statement. Rourke glanced back at the others with a performative shrug. "Let's see if she can crack 2 real pins." Keller's smile was thin, dismissive. Captain Latham's gaze hardened. "This is controlled speed only, no competitive pressure, no impact trauma, no escalation." Rourke dipped his head. "Of course, sir," Keller added, standard tempo. "We'll follow her lead." False. Their bodies betrayed them. Frames tightening, angles pre-measured, hands primed to turn a drill into a low-grade takedown masked as confusion. Iris simply nodded. "I'll demonstrate the baseline release and counterpin," she said evenly. "If the attackers escalate, the technique escalates." Her voice didn't lift or waver, but it cut through the circle of 300 like a blade. Whether they knew it yet or not, those two had volunteered for something they couldn't back out of. The mat held warmth from sun and boots. Iris Vale stepped into the center, unbothered by the soft thud of combat souls closing in. She rolled her shoulders once, quiet, bleeding off tension the way she always had before submerged drills. In through the nose, out through the teeth, measured, steady. Rourke and Keller moved to either side, not like professionals setting a scenario, but like hunters drifting toward prey they didn't respect. She lowered herself onto her back with intention, arms loose at her sides, legs aligned with the tape marks. Standard supine restraint posture for a subsurface dual-body pin, what happens in flooded cabins or crushed tank spaces. No room, no leverage, only pain and control. She flicked her eyes once to Captain Latham at the ring's edge. "Ready," he answered with a single nod. Rourke circled to her upper left, looming, fingers flexing. Keller crouched near her feet, the grin gone, replaced by something colder, precise. "I've got shoulders," Rourke muttered. "Legs," Keller replied. The exchange wasn't for her. It was for the audience, still performing, still posturing. Iris closed her eyes for one breath, then opened them, snapping every nerve into place. Hips square, shoulders set, chin tucked a fraction. Rourke dropped his weight, one knee planting outside her left shoulder, the other bracing against her sternum, not gently. "She won't break both of us," he muttered, loud enough for the front ranks to catch it. Calder added his voice, dropping low, both hands hovering over her calves. "We'll take it easy going up. Don't want her twisting anything?" No laughter followed, not this time. A hush settled over the watching operators, some shifting, others frozen. The ring cinched tight, not just the formation but the air itself, because everyone felt it now. This wasn't standard trash talk. It was the pressure right before a line gets crossed. Lena said nothing. She adjusted her wrists on the mat, offsetting her elbows by an inch, maybe less, but enough. Her breathing didn't quicken. She didn't flinch. She waited. Commander Ashcroft raised a hand, holding it a beat longer than usual, as if hoping something might change, as if offering the two men one last, silent exit. Then he called for slow phase contact. Neither complied. There was no slow phase. No simulation. Rowan came down hard, slamming his full forearm across Lena's collarbone, trapping her neck and shoulders in a crushing V. Calder dropped both knees over her thighs and cinched his arms around her boots in a tight combat wrap, real restraint, not a demo grip. The entire ring recoiled. You didn't need training to see the difference. This wasn't controlled contact. This was domination. Rowan leaned in, his face inches from hers, breath hot. "Show us something real, Sergeant." Calder tightened his hold until his knuckles blanched. "Yeah, break free now." The trap was sprung. The fuse lit. And in that instant, everything changed. Lena's eyes opened fully. Her breathing didn't spike, but something behind her expression disappeared. The stillness was gone. What replaced it was colder, cleaner, more lethal. She wasn't simulating anymore. She was surviving. "You are no longer within demonstration protocol," she said, flat, calm, and loud enough for every man in the ring to hear. Neither backed off. Rowan smiled. Calder shifted his weight. They thought it was still a game, not realizing they'd just granted permission for a response they were never trained to face. Rowan wasn't subtle. He drove his weight forward, grinding his forearm harder across Lena's collarbone, not enough to snap bone, but enough to bruise, to choke, to assert. His elbow hovered dangerously close to her throat. It wasn't instructional pressure. It wasn't competitive pressure. It was a warning wrapped in ego. Below, Calder locked his palms behind her boots, cinching tighter until tendons stood out like cables. His knees dug into the outsides of her thighs, sealing her hips. It was a grappler's hold, applied with full combat strength instead of controlled simulation. Both men knew exactly what they were doing. Both also knew exactly what they were violating. The operators in the front row stiffened. Many had used these techniques in real, compromised rescues. They knew the difference between demonstration force and dominance. The arena went dead quiet. Ashcroft stepped forward, just one step, drawing a sharp breath to bark the freeze. But Rowan dipped his head, dropping his voice to a gravelly whisper, loud enough for her and the closest ears to catch. "Let's see the real training, Sergeant." Calder squeezed again, crushing her ankles together. "Come on, show us how you magic your way out of this." They thought they were in control. They thought they were making a point. They believed mass, muscle, and reputation would protect them. They'd overlooked the one rule that never bends: never trap a rescuer trained to break free. Lena's chest expanded once, slow, intentional, her eyes fully opening, pupils crisp, posture subtly reconfiguring beneath their shared weight. This wasn't panic. It wasn't rage. It was a shift. That razor-edge instant when the mind stops running a scenario and starts answering danger. The same instant her awareness had flipped years ago in the South China Sea, pinned under a snapped support while comms crackled with shouting, water creeping up her mask, steel crying under strain. She survived then by letting the body outrun thought, and that switch had just thrown again. Reyes saw it a half-second too late. "Too late," Kellen muttered. Lena spoke first, not loud, not theatrical, just one flat sentence that cut through the ring of operators like an alarm. "You are no longer operating under demonstration parameters." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a vow. It was a designation, a factual call that the line between controlled exercise and live response had been crossed. A few operators in front inhaled sharply. Someone whispered, "Damn." Sloan froze mid-step. He knew what that sentence meant. Everyone did. It meant the restraints were gone. It meant the counters would be real. It meant escalation would answer survival, not instruction. It meant these two had triggered something irreversible. But Kellen didn't register the warning, or he heard it and dismissed it. He leaned in harder. "Stop talking and get out," he said. Reyes grinned again, breath tight with confidence. "Yeah, move." Neither man had any idea, none at all, that they were 3 seconds from learning a lesson that would follow them for life. If they ever walked the same afterward, Kellen never noticed it. Not the shift, not the breath. Not the precise micro-adjustment of Lena's hips. If he felt anything, it was the sudden absence of resistance. Her body, pinned and inert a moment earlier, yielded, not in surrender but with intent. A deliberate slackening that pulled him forward, drew him deeper. His forearm bore down on her collarbone. And then it happened. Her left elbow slid, not rising with force, but pivoting inward, gliding beneath his armpit like a blade leaving its sheath. Before his brain caught up, her fingers were already hooked under his elbow, finding the soft pocket just above the joint. At the same time, her opposite shoulder slipped back a fraction. Hips turned, spine coiled. Then, crack. The sound snapped across the enclosure like dry timber giving way. Kellen didn't scream. His body jerked sideways as if yanked by a wire, elbow folding wrong, shoulder tearing free. As Lena completed the spiral lock, turning his pressure against him, his size betrayed him. He slammed chest first into the mat, face skidding on the vinyl. Air burst from his lungs like a punctured bag. His legs kicked on reflex. His upper body was finished, neutralized, taken apart. The circle of operators gasped together, loud, stunned. It hadn't taken 10 seconds. It hadn't taken 5. It had taken 2. 2 seconds from pin to collapse. Lena didn't hesitate. She flowed up from her back in one smooth motion, boots rotating beneath her, left knee setting lightly, arms ready, not aggressive, just prepared. Kellen writhed beside her, clutching his ruined elbow. He wasn't screaming yet, but the sounds tearing from his throat made one thing clear. He wasn't standing again. Rays, still locked around her ankles, stared, blinking, trying to understand what he'd just seen. What the hell? But Lyra had already shifted her balance. Her breathing stayed calm, controlled. Her hands didn't tremble. She didn't even look toward Calder. Every ounce of her focus locked onto Knox. The crowd didn't move. Vale said nothing. Every man in that ring was frozen, mouths parted, eyes stretched wide. They had just watched a fighter infamous for overpowering training partners collapse in under 2 seconds without a yell, without drama, without warning. And the woman who had done it was already resetting her heel for the next break. Knox's fingers twitched. His mind screamed to clamp down harder, cinch the hold, set his legs, drag her back before she could rise fully. But his body stalled because what he had just seen, what he had just felt, wasn't sparring. It was extraction, the kind of movement you don't imitate. The kind born from blackout drills and breach scenarios where hesitation means death. Still, instinct surged. "No way she breaks me too," he snarled. He yanked violently at her ankles, trying to torque her into a bad rollover, his knee snapping up to scissor across her shin. But he misread her hips. Missed the subtle change in her heel angle. Didn't realize Lyra Vance had rotated her pelvis offline, deliberately throwing her spine out of alignment, not to resist the pull, but to reroute it. His own force betrayed him. Lyra's left leg slid behind his wrist at the exact moment it needed to. She didn't fight the drag. She accepted it. The instant he pulled, she dropped her full weight, turning with the motion, her heel biting into the inside of his forearm just above the ulna, where muscle meets joint. Then she rolled inward and drove her foot down. Crack. This sound wasn't sharp like Calder's spiral. It was heavy, wet, like a limb tearing instead of snapping clean. Knox's body lurched back. His grip vanished. His face contorted into something raw. Disoriented, terrified, stunned by the mutiny of his own arm, he staggered 2 steps, clutching his forearm to his chest, the elbow bent at an impossible angle. "My arm, my foot, my arm." The words lagged. The pain did not. Lyra rose without haste, boots planted, spine straight. She didn't rush him. Didn't strike. She simply turned with precise control, pivoting on her rear foot, rebuilding her stance as if she'd never been trapped at all. Knox's breathing went thin, his mouth opening, closing. He half-shifted forward as if pride alone might still sell dominance. She answered without force. She stepped in once smoothly, lowered herself beside him, and set one palm at the base of his neck. The other steadied his elbow, not to harm, but to support. Her voice was flat, precise. "Stop resisting. Your arm is unstable. Knox went still, not from fear but from comprehension. She wasn't punishing him. She was containing him, shielding him from worse damage. She'd ended the break at the joint, hadn't driven it into the shoulder, hadn't shattered the clavicle, hadn't ruined the wrist. She had restrained herself. The crowd saw it. So did he. For the first time since entering the ring, Knox didn't smirk. He said nothing. And inside that silence came clarity. This wasn't chance. This was control, measured, clinical, lethal only because it could have continued and chose not to. No one moved. Not a breath, not a sound. 300 Navy SEALs stood locked in place. Boots sunk into rubberized matting and cold concrete. Mouths open. Eyes unblinking. It felt as if time itself had fractured, split cleanly apart by two impossible noises. A crack followed by a sharp snap. 2 operators went down, both disabled. And the woman at the center never reacted. She didn't raise her voice, didn't exhale harder, didn't blink. Elena Cross rose from her crouch beside Tanner like a clinician finishing an incision, stepping away from the mat with deliberate precision. Her spine straight, posture exact, face unreadable. She brushed one gloved hand along her belt and turned slightly toward Commander Rowlands. "Medical response required for both," she said. That was it. Her voice never wavered. Her hands stayed steady. There was no hint of anger or triumph in her stance, only process. Around her, the mat was scattered with shattered pride. Dalton lay curled on his side, groaning through clenched teeth, one arm twisted unnaturally. Tanner remained on his knees, gripping his forearm like releasing it might end everything. His mouth moved, but no sound came. No one applauded. No one needed to. What they had witnessed wasn't a show. It wasn't performance. It was anatomy, an exhibition not of brute force, but restraint. 3 SEALs in the front row exchanged a look. All seasoned operators, all with deployments outnumbering their birthdays in uniform. One of them, gray at the temples, whispered into the stillness, "That wasn't power. That was precision." A combat medic was already sprinting in from the edge of the ring, trauma kit bouncing at his side, another close behind. Still, no one else moved. Roland stood frozen. His clipboard sagged in his grip, like even paper had lost its purpose. And Elena didn't linger. She didn't scan the room for validation. She stepped back 3 measured paces from Tanner and settled into parade rest, boots aligned, breathing even. Her gloves lightly dusted from the mat, otherwise untouched. It felt rehearsed. A routine she'd executed dozens of times under pressure, underwater, in darkness. And for the first time since the ring formed that morning, not a single man watching her saw a female instructor. They saw something else entirely. They saw the last person they would ever underestimate. The medics dropped beside Dalton and Tanner, checking vitals, stabilizing joints. Somewhere near the back row, a young trainee, barely cleared through pipeline evaluation, leaned toward the operator beside him and whispered, "How did she do that?" No answer followed. The silence had already claimed it. The air inside the debrief room was clean and motionless, cool without chill. Quiet without emptiness. Staff Sergeant Elena Cross sat upright in a steel chair bolted to the floor, hands resting calmly in her lap, expression neutral. There were no restraints, no tension in her shoulders, just focus. Across the table sat 3 officials. A naval legal advisor with sharp eyes and glasses low on her nose. A SEAL command liaison with arms crossed, rank stripes pressed tight, and a safety compliance director tapping a pencil eraser in a slow, rhythmic beat. The review wasn't aggressive. It was required. 3 cameras recorded everything, 1 body cam, 2 mounted on the walls. The legal officer spoke first. "Staff Sergeant Cross, at what point did the training evolution depart from authorized protocol?" Elena answered immediately. "When Petty Officer Dalton applied full-force compression to my collarbone using his forearm, and Operator Tanner secured my ankles with a non-instructional restraint." The command liaison leaned forward. "You're certain it was non-instructional?" There were no indicators of controlled tempo or regulated technique. The simulation framework collapsed the moment physical contact escalated. The safety director wrote quickly. The legal officer continued, "Did you issue a verbal warning prior to counter-engagement?" "Yes, verbatim." "And what did you say?" Elena met her gaze. I stated, you are no longer operating within demonstration protocol. They stopped, double-checking the wording against the preloaded field manual on the tablet. Code phrase verified. That exact line was indexed in the Joint Operations Training Directive under the Active Intervention provision, a provision almost never activated and even less often upheld. The Naval Operations Liaison scrubbed through the synchronized feed from Camera 3. Visual confirmation. 2 quick taps. The silent replay left no room for doubt. Hale driving downward. Rowan cinching the hold.